Wow, San Diego City Council and the controversial Kettner and Vine homeless shelter continues to draw scrutiny. Scott Silverman is a crisis coach, a veteran treatment provider, and he's been helping communities and businesses on what works to help in homelessness. He's on the line with us now. Scott, welcome back to the program. How are you, bud?
Good, man. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were talking about this particular shelter seems to have almost a never-ending controversy around it. What does that date back to? What is causing a 1,000-bed shelter to be so controversial in the city of San Diego?
Well, two things, I believe. First and foremost, the city's leadership is under the gun, with more shelter beds going away at the end of December, with the homeless population up about 30% over the last 18 months. There's this crisis going on that seems to be unmanageable or not managed effectively. So they're trying to find a way to create a lot of beds quickly, and nobody wants it in their backyard. So they found a motivated seller, in my opinion, who's willing to make a deal. And then, of course, these closed-door conversations nobody hears about. It's hard to determine what they're actually doing. But my attitude is to put 1,000 people in an 18,000 square foot footprint is absurd and should never happen.
Well, Scott, the amount of money required for that, too, people may say, well, okay, let's say it gets approved. And again, we're very heated public comments yesterday, and then you mentioned they went into some closed-door sessions, which always make, I think, most San Diegans nervous when they said, we'll tell you about it later when we pull this. It was like $30 million to kick it off. I mean, even if they said, let's fix it, we mitigated environmental questions, what have you, it's not going to happen overnight. And you mentioned where a lot of these beds are going away at other facilities. This is a crisis, isn't it, moving into the winter here?
Absolutely. And you would think by now our community, based on, I've been at this for almost 35 years, and in my opinion, it's gotten worse over the years. And my attitude is if the seller decided to donate the building, and the seller decided to donate the building and do all the rehab, if you will, it's a minimum of a year away, number one. And number two, then we still need the operating money for it. And when you talk to the people who would be customers of this particular, location, they don't even want to go there. On top of that, something nobody talks about, as soon as they get a green light, if they do, they'll get national publicity around it. Now, imagine you're a social worker going into the winter. You're going to tell all your clients, hey, San Diego's got 1,000 beds coming online the next year. Let's get you on the Greyhound.
Yeah, it'd be $13 million up front, they estimated. Those things are always low estimates. And then $30 million a year, up to $30 million to operate every year during a 30-year lease. And this seemed to be a hurry up, let's do this. Now it continues to be in limbo. Scott Silverman with us on this, Leland Conway and Mark Larson here. So, Leland, when you're talking about where this goes, we touched on this earlier, the neighborhood was not fully consulted either, because there was an assumption that, this is north of Little Italy, it's a warehouse, and people on the other side of the freeway went, wait a minute, this is down our street. So there's that backfill as well here, backwash.
Well, certainly, and a population base, if for some reason they wave a magic wand and people decide they're going to stay there, they have to go out during the day. And if I've been on the site a couple times, the only place you can get a cup of coffee is at the Shell station, which means people will be walking around the entire area, going into Little Italy, crossing over PCH to get into Point Loma. But again, you can't put 1,000 people who have mental health issues, suffer from substance abuse, and have been disenfranchised for years under one roof and not expect to have major issues, even if it's well managed. And so far, we have not well managed the homeless growth in our community. So I'm concerned about who's making these decisions. The money piece will probably have to be spent, whether it's in one location or satellite sites or multiple sites, because we have to do that. Because if we don't find a way to get people inside, they'll continue to live outside, and the things that take place when you're living outside are horrible. And we shouldn't let anyone in our community be in a position to have to live outside.
We're talking with Scott Silverman. How would you have gone about this? Like, let's say you were the mayor, and you sort of, I think you nailed the problem. You put 1,000 people with these issues, and let's face it, that's the truth. They have these issues, right? I mean, a lot of times people that have favored more and more government intervention here, they tend to paint this as it's 90% people who just fell through the cracks and they want to get back on their feet. And the reality is it's probably the opposite of that. So how would you solve that problem? You have 1,000 people doing those kinds of things out in the open, and you need to get them inside. How would you do that?
Well, first and foremost, I can't even get the mayor to talk with me about my experience as a subject matter expert to see if I could be a resource to help guide the process. Well, first of all, there has to be an intervention with individuals. We have to meet everybody where they're at. You can't process somebody who just fell through the cracks the same way you might somebody who's been living on the streets, who suffers from addiction, who's self-medicating, who has untreated trauma, the same way you might treat a senior citizen or a mom with 3 kids. So each one of those populations I just mentioned, that's just a handful of them, and then you get into the veterans who are suffering from PTS, you can't treat them all the same way, and they all need a different level of care, and some may need 90 days of support, some might need an indefinite period of support. So the idea is we need scattered sites. I mean, Sunbreak's out there with a wonderful idea, up there near Miramar. I don't know if that's ever going to take place, but their concept they've been talking about, the level of support that they're getting from individuals, we have to find people that really want to find a way to end homelessness, not just to put them in shelters and not just to buy them a new jacket and get them a new sleeping bag and buy them a new tent, because that's a form of enabling in its own right. Yeah. And it's not fair to give somebody something free and say, look, when you're done with us, just take off with no tools.
What are the lessons of Gavin Newsom? We mentioned it almost sounds like some kind of an SNL bit, but it was yesterday, the 20th anniversary of then Mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, promising to end homelessness in San Francisco as one example in 10 years. It was the 20th anniversary of that. So obviously, definition of insanity, same thing over and over again. It's not exactly working the way it's been handled. So time for some different solutions like you're talking about.
Well, and how does California end up with 40% plus of all the homeless in the country? Exactly. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as a pretty progressive state, and with all the issues going on with fentanyl, with cartels, we have to treat this like we did COVID. It has to be real-time data. It has to be real-time, long-term support, and there needs to be leadership who has a full autonomy, who can move between the county and the city and say, this is how we're going to get it done. It's going to spread throughout the community. Everyone's going to have to take a little chunk of it, and we're going to have to find ways to really not only get people on the inside, but teach them life skills, help them get back to work. And those who are the hardest to serve may need to be served for the rest of their lives. So when you think about the population, there are people there that are probably able-bodied. I know they're able-bodied because I've worked with them for a long time that could go get a job in 90 days after some treatment and get stabilized. But there are people out there with mental health issues that are going untreated, and no one knows until we assess them what their care is going to be like long-term. So, and whatever the numbers are, what they think it's going to cost to run a place like that, security alone could cost you $30 million a year. And then how are you going to get, backfill it with mental health providers when there's a 5-year backlog right now of facilitating mental health support just in our community? We don't have enough detox beds. There isn't long-term affordable housing on the horizon that's realistic. So when you factor all those things in, we can't just say, let's get more tents, let's get more jackets. Somebody needs to take a leadership role. You're right. Newsom did it for 20 years. I've been through 5 mayors. They've all tried. They've all talked about it. Yeah. And unfortunately, you can't do it in a 4-year mayoral term. It has to come from the top, and there's got to be a will to create systemic change. We have not done that yet.
Well, Scott, listen, thanks for your work. Thanks for being willing to come on with us. I'm sure we'll talk again. Keep us posted on all of this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Scott Silverman, crisis coach, veteran treatment provider. He's been working for a long time.